And Caleb is with me right now, my
Hey,
man. Caleb, how you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm good. I'm good.
Just to give a heads up, Caleb Maupin is a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and author. Um, I'm I keep saying his new book. We're gonna have to change that. But Caleb, what is your latest book?
It's called "The Killing of Brian Thompson and the Danger of an American Years of Lead." And Amazon made me change the title to just "An American Years of Lead: The Danger of an American Years of Lead." But it's about the Luigi Mangione case, and the way the media has covered that.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's my latest book.
So tell me, conversations are taking place in Riyadh between Russia and the United States. Europe and Zelensky have been sidelined. They have been throwing a hissy fit. Apparently, they had a quote emergency summit. Germany, France, the UK, et cetera, et cetera. Give me your take on these talks. What are your thoughts in regards to, and I'm leaving that question broad because I want you to go wherever you want to go with it. But what are your conversations? What are your thoughts on the talks that are taking place between Russia and the US?
I'm holding my breath. I mean, this is we are really close to a really big development, and there's so much taking place in the background. I don't know if you've seen, but the reports seem to indicate that Visa and Mastercard are very soon going to be accessible in Russia once
Right.
again. In addition to that, we have seen a number of Russians or Americans who've been arrested in Russia have been released. And Marco Rubio is in Saudi Arabia, and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he's in Saudi Arabia, and it appears that Trump has said very soon he could be meeting with Russian President Putin. He said it's likely to happen very soon. We're in a really good situation where this war could finally come to an end, and we have Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth basically warning everyone that Russia will declare victory, because they will, and that'll be used to attack the Trump administration. And he's saying, "Look, Russia's going to declare victory no matter what, so just prepare for that." And it looks like we could see an end to the hostilities in Ukraine. We could see a border being drawn that is to the agreement of all parties that would, end the killing. And Ukraine is lashing out like crazy with rage. Zelensky is saying crazy things. And we saw the Ukrainians actually sent 7 drones to attack an oil storage facility in Kazakhstan run by an American oil company. And so Ukraine is lashing out like crazy. Would fit this in with that presidential assassination attempt from Ryan Roth, the Ukrainiac, the deranged individual who went to fight in Ukraine and then came back to the United States and tried to kill President Donald Trump.
Mhm.
I associate what he did with the Ukrainian government and their networks. Maybe that's conspiratorial. But at the same time, I mean, if you look at it, the fact that this crazy American citizen with a very serious criminal record went over to Ukraine, got involved in recruiting Ukrainian fighters from around the world, according to his own statements, involved with the U.S. State Department in doing so, then comes back to the United States and tries to kill President Trump. That makes me think that the Ukrainian apparatus very much sees Trump as a threat to them. And I think there's a very good chance that we could see Donald Trump deliver on his campaign promise and end this conflict. And I really hope that is the case, but we're in the moments where I feel like everything that happens in the next week could make a really, really big difference. And we're very close. And if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. And I feel like
Yeah,
if this fails, it'll be a disaster. It'll be very hard to get back to the spot that we're in. And I really, really hope we can get peace.
I agree with you, 1,000%. And I guess I feel the same way. All of these people are being killed, and I can't necessarily come up with a good reason as to why. What do you think this conversation is ultimately about? Like, meaning, from my understanding, some of the reports have come out that said Ukraine is a chip on the table. It's not the main thing. It's one of many things that they're having a conversation about in regards to this kind of normalization of relationship between the two countries. What do you think that means in real terms in regards to the conversation they're having?
Well, I think that is just an acknowledgement of the fact this war has never really been about Ukraine. It's been about Russia. And it's
Mhm.
about the fact that Russia wants to be a major player in the world economy. As the large country that Russia is, the major exporter of oil and gas, Russia is a major player. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, they were devastated economically, but they restored themselves after a decade or so of economic looting by a president who was installed by the United States, Boris Yeltsin, who the USA meddled in Russia's elections like crazy in 1996 to make sure that Boris Yeltsin won the re-election. There's a cover of Time magazine about this. There's even a documentary about this. The USA worked overtime to make sure that Gennady Zyuganov of the Communist Party didn't win the election in Russia, but rather the election was won by Boris Yeltsin, who wrecked their economy. But after Boris Yeltsin, you had the rise of Russian President Putin, who restored Russia's economic strength by reasserting state control over oil and gas and using the oil and gas revenues to stabilize the economy and rebuild the industrial base of Russia. And he's been making sure that Russia can continue to rise and operate as a key player on the global stage, as a modern industrial power, as a country with millions of people in it, with a strong economy. And the Western former colonial powers, the NATO countries, Britain, France, Germany, etc., they don't want Russia to be that. They want Russia to be down and out. They want Russia to be impoverished, but they don't want Russia to be an equal player at the global stage. They don't like Russia competing with them on the oil and gas markets. They don't like Russia, having influence throughout the region, throughout Central Asia, throughout Eastern Europe. And so because of that, Russia has had to basically fight to just to kind of acknowledge its existence. When I was in Russia, there's a number of people that I met who are like, why can't we just be a normal country? Why aren't we allowed to just be a country like any other? And that's because the Western colonial powers don't acknowledge their right to exist. They don't have the right to be a country. And the war in Ukraine is just an extension of this kind of effort to prevent Russia from being an equal, country on the global stage. And that, the USA overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, installed a fanatically anti-Russian government that then proceeded to start bombing the people in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions and killing them, and to the point that that Russia felt it had to move in and protect the people of the republics that had declared independence in 2014. There's no question that there were these bio labs that were being developed. And I tell people how wild it is. We in the United States, the United States said that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. It didn't. That was a lie. And Iraq is on the other side of the planet. And so based on a lie that a country on the other side of the planet might have weapons of mass destruction, the USA invaded Iraq and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Well, here we have a situation where there's a country right on Russia's border that is actually developing chemical and biological weapons right on their border. And the U.S. government, their major partner, admits they're doing this. Victoria Nuland said this on the floor of Congress with Marco Rubio. They are developing chemical and biological weapons, no question about it. And they're right on Russia's border. And then there's people that are sympathetic to Russia who are being bombed and killed and have kind of declared independence from the country. And under those circumstances, Russia felt they had to move in to protect these folks. And we know the USA worked very, very hard to provoke this. This was very similar to the Afghan trap of the 1980s, where Brzezinski did everything he could to provoke a situation where the Soviet Union felt it had to move into Afghanistan. And then they used the conflict in Afghanistan to drain the Soviet Union economically, et cetera. They're doing the same kind of thing. They want Russia to pay a heavy cost in Ukraine, and they want to demoralize the Russian people. They want to weaken the Russian economy. They want to use this as an excuse to further isolate Russia economically around the world. And all of that has failed. These talks are taking place in Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia was asked by the Biden administration, hey, we need you to cut off Russia. We need you to cut off Russia because they attacked Ukraine. So therefore, they've got to be just completely locked out, impose sanctions. And the Saudi crown prince said, no, we're not going to do that. And the reason is because Saudi Arabia is a huge oil exporting country. And the amount of oil they put out really has an impact on the price. And Russia is also a huge oil exporting country. And so Russia and Saudi Arabia, they need to be able to call each other. The Crown Prince needs to be able to call up Putin and say, look, we're putting out this many barrels of oil this today. What are you going to do? Because that has a huge impact on the global economy. And if Saudi Arabia had gone along with the United States and just cut off Russia as Biden expected that they would do, that would be a huge loss for Saudi Arabia, and it would prevent them from having necessary relations when it comes to oil prices. So Saudi Arabia, frankly, just said no. India did the same thing, right? India, USA demanded, all right, India, we want you to just cut off Russia, and India's like, no, we're not going to do that. And a number of countries that the United States expected would just comply with their effort to just completely isolate Russia refused to go along with it. And the Biden administration, I mean, we've spent billions and billions of dollars, all kinds of weaponry. But when it really gets down to it, Russia's not destroyed economically. I was just over there last March and I saw how much the population is rallying behind the government, how popular the Russian president is, how much support there is for the military operation. Russia's not going to submit, and Trump realizes that, and the American people realize that. The American people are not enthusiastic about continuing this. And so I'm hoping that common sense will prevail and we can see a peace treaty, and Zelensky will be forced to accept it because he's never really been a sovereign leader. Ukraine is not an independent country. Let's just get this idea that Russia is attacking an independent country. No, Ukraine lost its independence. It has a government that is a front for NATO. Zelensky was elected on a peace platform, and then he got into office and realized he didn't have the power to set the policy. The policy was being set by the NATO generals who were installed in the 2014 coup. Ukraine is not a sovereign country. It is a vehicle through which Russia can be attacked. It is a vehicle, a proxy of NATO through which Russia can be antagonized. And the neutral president was removed in 2014 to make sure that it played that role. So I'm hoping that we can see negotiations leading toward a de-escalation of hostilities. That would be good for Ukraine. All these people that claim to care about Ukraine, well, you don't care about Ukraine by wanting their people to keep dying, and they're dragging every old man and young boy off the street. It's really horrendous in Ukraine right now. If you care about Ukraine, you should want a peace deal to happen. You should be an enthusiastic supporter of the negotiations.
I agree with you. Everything that just came out of your mouth, you have my full agreement with. I'm curious, why do you think Trump is? I don't get the sense that Trump is in love with Putin, and yet he is moving very fast in order to try to get a deal to end the conflict. Why do you think the U.S. has taken this position now, especially coming from the right? Like, as I point out to my audience, I feel myself, I'm in a weird space. I find myself to be firmly on the left in a policy sense. And in being an honest actor on the left who cares about things like healthcare, education, etc., I also care about things of war. I don't like this idea that all of these people died for no reason. This was a nonsense conflict. It didn't need to happen, and yet here we are. And so why do you think that Trump is moving on this now?
Well, I'll tell you, I have done a deep dive recently into, of all people, Paula White Cain, who is Donald Trump's spiritual advisor, who's been put as the head of the White House Faith Office. And I looked into Paula White Cain, who is Donald Trump's personal friend, his advisor. And I looked into her, and if you listen to her preaching, it's all about the power of the personal will, like personal willpower and spiritual willpower, and the prosperity gospel, the idea that you can grow and expand, and that Donald Trump is a businessman, and that he grew up in the church of Reverend Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. If you ever hear that cliche, is the glass half empty or half full? That's Reverend Norman Vincent Peale. And that Donald Trump is a businessman, and he believes that if you work hard and if you have a vision and you go out and build and construct, you can make lots of money. He believes in the American dream, right? Go out and achieve your dreams and work really hard and have a vision and be positive, and all these kind of American cliches that are associated with the American kind of free market perspective. That's what Donald Trump believes, and Donald Trump's coalition are millionaires and billionaires who believe that, right? Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, right? I mean, he's a guy who was struggling with cocaine addiction, got over his addiction, had an idea about how to design a pillow, started a company, and has made millions of dollars designing pillows. The Hobby Lobby store, right? It's a chain of craft stores throughout the Midwest that's, owned by a family. They've made millions of dollars, and they're conservative, and they're small business owners. And if you look at it, Donald Trump's coalition tends to be rich people that are not part of the club. And when I talk about the club, I'm talking about, the old money entrenched power that is tied in with London, the Anglo-American establishment, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Carnegies, the Mellons, the big New England banking elites that are really in with the intelligence community, that are really in with the British, and those folks have a different perspective. They have much more of a managerial perspective. When we hear the stuff coming out from the World Economic Forum, and they're talking about overpopulation, and they're talking about kind of a managerial scheme, they're thinking long term. How do we save our system? How do we make sure that the Western colonial powers stay at the top of the world, and the big Wall Street banks and London's we can dominate the world? And how can we utilize the government to assert control over the entire world, but also over our own population? How can we stay in power in the long term? They're a managerial elite, but the bulk of American capitalists and business owners are not part of this club, and they resent that. And they don't want regulations, because those regulations are not going to be written by them. They're going to be written by the ultra monopolies. And so Donald Trump represents the bulk of American capitalists who resent the American government for regulating the economy. They want deregulation, and they really believe in the American dream. Work hard, and what is the new thing that they say? Manifest, right? If you could manifest your achievement, right? I mean, that's what they believe. And Donald Trump believes that. And Russia is a country that basically, in an international sense, has pulled itself up by its bootstraps. They were down and out in the 90s, but they took control of their economy. They had a president who's a builder and took control of their oil and gas, and made lots of money with oil and gas, and used that money to rebuild their industrial sector and lift people out of poverty. And it's a similar kind of thing. And that really the fight in the world today is between the growing sectors of the economy that are growth oriented, that believe in growth, and the Wall Street, London speculation economy that is about the dominance of bankers, and the managerial schemes those bankers want to impose in order to maintain their power. And Donald Trump is ripping apart the U.S. state right now. I mean, they're firing IRS agents. They're getting rid of the USAID, the FBI, because this is Donald Trump on behalf of people like Elon Musk, and people like Hobby Lobby and Mike Lindell and and they're trying to rip apart the regulatory agencies that write the rules that get in the way of these, kind of lower level capitalists. And he's trying to put in division what Paula Kane Whites believes. He wants to create America, a country where if you just work hard, you can make lots of money, and there's no big government to get in the way. He believes that. And as Russia is a country that's trying to pull itself up and build and construct and align itself with African countries and independent countries that are doing a similar thing, there's a common interest and there's a common vision that we can see economic growth. Whereas the old money establishment wants to heavily regulate things in order to maintain their dominance. And so Donald Trump, there's a common interest, and he may not even realize it on the level that I'm laying it out here. I hope he does. But there's a common interest in that Russia is pro-growth, and the layer of American business owners who are aligned with Trump are pro-growth, and the imperialist world order, globalism, imperialism, the Wall Street, London, global financial system is anti-growth. And that's what it really gets down to. And that, look, when Donald Trump went to North Korea and met with Kim Jong-un, one of his biggest supporters was Jim Rogers, who, I I actually met him. He came to the RT studio one time. He's a business owner, and he lives in Singapore. And why was he a big supporter of Trump going to North Korea? He said, I want to make money in North Korea. There's a lot of money to be made in North Korea. Most North Koreans can speak more than one language. Those mountains are full of minerals. They're already making their own cell phones in-house. Why shouldn't we Americans find a way that we can make money off of North Korea? North Korea wants to grow. We need to make money. Let's do it. But the establishment, the intelligence apparatus, in particular John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, who've both had their security clearances stripped away by the Trump, they sabotaged Donald Trump's ability to restore relations and make peace with North Korea. And that there's kind of a push and pull. There's a lot of American business owners that just want to make money, and they see this new BRICS economy that's emerging as a great opportunity to make money. And the idea we have to hate them because they're not part of the club and they're authoritarian regimes and all, they don't care about that. They're thinking like, our economy in the West isn't doing too well. We could make money trading with Russia and China and India and North Korea and Vietnam and Venezuela, and why not? And they're just not part of this, this agenda of trying to maintain the dominance of the Western system. And that's why I think that's really what I think is happening. And that doesn't mean everything Trump does is necessarily good, but I'm telling you, there's a big division among our elite, and Donald Trump represents the section that is less in favor of the march toward World War III, less in favor of the emerging low-wage police state, and more in favor of economic growth. And that's why I think that his election was a great step forward. And I think that what's happening now is full of potential because there's a division of economic interest between different factions of our elite. And Donald Trump represents a section of our elite that just doesn't see opposing Russia and beating down all the countries aligned with Russia around the world as in their interest.
And you're saying this is a lefty. That basically this was a good step forward. There will be a lot of lefties that will set themselves on fire to hear that.
Well, and where I disagree with Trump and Elon Musk, I'll just be real, is I don't think that just getting the government out of the economy is going to create economic growth. I mean, yeah. I'm certainly happy to see the FBI and CIA ripped apart, but getting rid of all these good paying federal employee jobs, I mean, that's a lot of money that's going to go into the U.S. economy, right? Those people are making six-figure salaries, and they're spending that money on houses and cars and all of that. And getting rid of all of that, that's spending that just goes out of the economy. And that, unfortunately, I think while Trump believes in growth and while he very much has this positive attitude that ties in with his spiritual beliefs and all of that, at the same time, he believes in this economic philosophy, this libertarian Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand economics that says you can cut your way into economic growth. Well, yeah. I would respectfully say you can't cut your way into economic growth. And how was Russia able to rebuild itself after the fall of the Soviet Union? They asserted state control over their natural resources and used that money to build, to subsidize and plan out the economy. And if you look at how China has been able to build itself up after the century of humiliation, it's been through asserting state control and central planning. They have 5-year economic plans, and that I'm pro-growth. And that's what socialism and communism historically have always been, pro-growth, build, construct 5-year economic plans, mass mobilizations. I don't believe this growth is going to come from the free market. And ultimately, I think that if the people that are aligned with Trump realize, come to an understanding of the real situation, they're going to realize we need the same thing right here. Right now, we have a government in the United States that is a vehicle for the big monopolies to regulate their opponents out of existence, to maintain their control. And so a lot of people say we need to get that government, out of the way. Well, I think ultimately, not only do we need to get that government out of the way, we need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a strong popular state that will beat back the power of the big corporations and monopolies and put oil and gas under public ownership here and create a great national bank that will inject credit into the communities throughout the United States that are struggling, that will hire the unemployed to start building high-speed railway and start, working on fusion energy, and that we need a popular state that will beat back the power of the big monopolies to stabilize our economy. Ultimately, that's what we need in the United States. And it's going to be a difficult thing for the lower levels of capital, the Elon Musks of the world and the Mike Lindells of the world to understand that, because that goes against everything they believe. They believe in the free market ideology. But ultimately, if you look at what the Communist Party of the United States advocated back when it was a strong political organization, before it was broken up after the end of the Second World War, they called for an anti-monopoly coalition, right? That's what they called for, an anti-monopoly coalition, a government that fought against the big monopolies that included, the working class, included small business owners, included even some of the rich and powerful that were against the monopolies that were driving toward militarism and a police state. And ultimately, that's what we need if we're going to defeat the drive toward World War III, if we're going to have peace around the world, if we're going to have economic rejuvenation, we need to create an anti-monopoly coalition in the United States. And that will ultimately be the solution to breaking up the globalist imperialist system and having a pro-growth economy in the United States. And that's ultimately what it's going to take, but it's not going to be something these people learn overnight. So that's where this is coming from. I see a direct economic interest here. There is a pro-growth perspective, and there is opposition to the interests of the globalist imperialist monopolies. That's where all this is coming from, in my view.
Yeah, I agree with you on this. I take it that Donald Trump took this position because he's looking at the way the dollar is being used. He's looking at the way the countries are organizing against this kind of usage of the dollar as a weapon. That Russia was one of the main countries that was pushing for this notion of de-dollarization, and that if you could deal with Russia, you can undercut this movement towards de-dollarization, something that would be detrimental to the U.S. So I take it as Trump's view of this is more realistic in the way that he's looking at it, as opposed to, let's say, the Democrats that just wanted forever war, had no way out of the war, and wanted to effectively keep it going for, quote, as long as it takes. Do you think, give me your take on that?
Well, as far as the dollar, part of it is, during the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the USA had the ability to just destroy a country. And there were three countries that really suffered horrendously. Iraq, right? The USA put sanctions on them. And I think the death count is 1.2 million, died as a result of the fact that they couldn't get chlorine to treat their water. They couldn't, and I mean, you read the World Health Organization reported that the impact of the U.S. sanctions on Iraq, because the USA just locked them out of the world economy. They were devastated. And I mean, it set the stage for the eventual invasion of Iraq. The reason the USA was able to roll into Iraq and effectively destroy them so well in 2003 was because they had just spent a decade just destroying them with sanctions. Cuba was very badly devastated to the point they only had electricity for a few hours a day in Cuba in the 90s. It was very bad. North Korea, they had a food crisis because they couldn't, import oil to run their tractors, and that their food system, they had an independent, self-sufficient food system, but they needed oil to run those tractors. And in the 90s, the petrodollar, the USA was able to just, freeze North Korea's food production, basically. It was a devastating time in North Korea. And that was the 90s. And that's kind of the playbook that Victoria Nuland and the Biden administration are playing with. Oh, if some country gets in our way, we'll just roll right over them. We'll just lock them out of the world economy, and they'll just be devastated economically. And that's what they get for not doing what we say. Well, you can't do that anymore because now there's a whole new economy in the world that you can trade with. And so if you tell a country, like they told North Korea in the 90s, you can't have dollars. And so North Korea says, okay, now we can't import oil, and now people starve to death. Well, nowadays, if you tell a country you can't have dollars, they say, okay, we'll get Chinese currency. We'll trade in something else. We'll use the ruble. And there's this whole other economy where if countries are locked out by the United States, they can just go elsewhere. It's weird. I mean, I feel like, our leaders can't be that stupid. Sometimes I would hear the Biden administration talk and other people in Washington, D.C. And I mean, there's even people in the Trump administration. I hear them talk, and it's like, you just want to slap them like, hello, for example, right? Venezuela and Iran are best pals, right? They get along great. Why? Because the USA has horrendous sanctions on Iran and horrendous sanctions on Venezuela. And so, Venezuela was having a food crisis. So they did business with Iran. And Iran, there's big Iranian supermarkets all over Venezuela and all of that. Well, the U.S. officials were up there. This must not happen. This can't happen. There cannot be Iranian food in Venezuela, and Iran and Venezuela can't be trading with each other. Well, you don't trade with them. You locked both countries out of the world economy. And so now they're trading with each other. Do you not understand this? If the USA wasn't trying to destroy Iran economically, if the USA wasn't trying to destroy Venezuela economically, they might be able to use that leverage to say to Venezuela or say to Iran, don't trade with the other one. But they've tried to destroy both countries and lock them both out of the economy. And so they're trading with each other now. That's how this works, right? I mean, if you kick two people out of the club and then they start and form their own club, without you, what right do you have to complain about it, right? But there's this kind of this entitlement that we have this a bit, they really do believe it's the 90s where they can just destroy a country. And if a country doesn't trade with them, then it's just devastated. That's not the way the global economy is. And if you realistically look at things, it's not realistic. And if the USA continues to operate as if it's the 1990s, maybe it's just a pride thing. But if you continue to operate as if it's the 1990s, this other alternative economy that countries are getting closer and closer to, and more people are trading with, is just going to get stronger, and we're going to get more and more isolated. And during the election, Donald Trump came out and said, look, the dollar, we could lose the dollar, and these sanctions that we've imposed around the world are making the dollar, eventually the dollar could fall as a result of this, and we'll all be a lot poorer because our currency will lose value. The US dollar is inflated because it's used in so many different countries, right? The more that a currency is used, the higher its value goes up.
Right.
And, the petrodollar, the fact that pretty much all oil transactions take place in the US dollar, the fact that the US dollar is used by a number of countries, that is a way that the US currency kind of has its value inflated. And that's why we have a somewhat high standard of living in the United States. And as these sanctions are imposed on countries, and as countries' ability to trade decreases, as countries don't get access to US dollars, as countries are locked out of US banks and US financial institutions, Russia right now is locked out of the SWIFT system, I believe, which is the main international bank transaction system. You do that, well, as a result, people just develop other currencies that they trade with, other systems. Russia and the BRICS countries have developed their own SWIFT system, their own. At this point, they're talking about how they've developed their own international banking, transaction system that they can just start using, and people just start taking their business elsewhere. And then your value and the value of the US dollar decreases. And that's really what's going on there. And I think Trump is just more of a realist. And again, he's not on board with, there is this feeling among a lot of the elite, in Washington. A lot of them are Rhodes Scholars. They go and they study they study in Britain, and there's the Council on Foreign Relations, and there's this ideology that they have. The West must stay at the top. The values of the West must be spread all over the world. And no, we just got to make sure that Russia and China don't keep rising. No, even if it costs us, even if it hurts our economy, we've got to be in a crusade for these Western values. We got to oppose these regimes. I don't think Donald Trump is on board with that. I don't think Donald Trump cares that much. Right? Yeah. I think Donald Trump just wants to see economic expansion happen. And so because of that, he's looking at this and he can just say it with a cool head. Look, if we keep doing this, our currency is going to lose its value. So let's just not. And then that makes them angry. Oh, no, you've got to do this. You got to do this. And he says, no, I don't have to do this. Right. I'm not part of this. He doesn't buy into the foreign policy establishment and their overall perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well,